Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Alert. Basically, this is a series that I'm making of cards or strategies and themes that you should really keep an eye out for because I strongly believe that they will shake up the metagame if people are not really prepared for them. Uh, Very recently, I talked about the an engine that would be really good with field spells and like the natural synergy that it might have moving forward because of how many strong field spells we have in the game and some field spells that we will have in the future, uh, like this one and this one and this one. So before I talk about today's segment, one honorable mention that I want to make is talking about the Visas planets and Runic Fountain. Runic Fountain is already being seen play in the TCG. One of the really strong decks at the moment that has been doing well, at least online, and is doing marginally well in a few regionals this season. Is the Runic Stun deck. Uh, the other cards I want to talk about are the Visas planets because even though this is just a planet for Kashtira, not really Visas, uh, Kashtira is another really popular strategy in the format at the moment. Not only that, I strongly think if we end up moving away from Snake Eye format or Snake Eyes actually get a little small of a hit, the Visas cards will probably see another format because I strongly believe that outside of Snake Eye, the Visas engine, for example, Vanadium and Tearlament, are like one of the higher ceiling strategies that we have in the game that just have been power crept. So as a very strong combo deck, we might see these someday in the future, especially since Konami already announced reprints for these cards in the Rarity collection that will incentivize a lot of people that are already fans of the Visas archetype and franchise to just move back to this strategy if it fits them accordingly. So now that I mentioned all of them, uh, now we can talk about today's theme and the reason I'm making this video. So the second episode of YGO Alert involves a monster uh, whose power can destroy life and death, and it can break the cycle themselves. And it is a monster that it really destroy. Not only does it destroy the souls of their enemy, but it actually burns them to crumbles. That is not verbatim, but almost the phrase that was mentioned in the trailer for Phantom Nightmare when they introduced the Ashened theme. So, Ashened is a TCG exclusive archetype that has already been showcased from Phantom Nightmare. Ever since its release, it has done nothing involving meta contention as of yet. However, I do strongly believe that all the cards from the Ashened archetype actually have some very good level of potential. And the way that the meta game and the way that the format is being shaping up as of late, it's leaning towards something that will benefit Ashen very quickly if the next wave of support becomes at least somewhat playable or even marginally better than what we have at the moment. I think the strongest cards right now are Awakening of Veidos and Veidos, the Dragon of Eruption of Extinction. So if we get cards that are at the same power level as these cards, I think this team will see a good amount of play in the future. But before we talk about Ashen itself, let's talk about Veidos. So Veidos is a monster that you can use as a hand trap to just destroy a field spell and then give it to your opponent. And basically, your opponent is put in an awkward position when they're facing Veidos because Veidos pretty much is becoming an obstacle for a lot of their plays. Uh, or is already occupying a monster in the spell and trap zone, and not only that, it can occupy like one of the extra monster zones, like downwards, like for example, like this, meaning that your opponent is probably forced to use like one side of columns to do some of their plays instead of the other side of columns because it is blocking like a potential zone that you can use for your link monsters. For example, if you're summoning Promethean Princess, you're forced to summon it on this zone and not on this one. Otherwise, you cannot still summon under Promethean Princess. Same thing with Sunlight Wolf. Same thing with other monsters that are very similar. So the one thing that is giving Veidos a very, very good advantage right now is people's ignorance with the Fire King Snake Eye strategies. Uh, like when the Fire King theme got introduced, Sanctuary of Fire King was one card that was played alongside the engine, but a lot of people are cutting it from their deck or just not using it as part of their strategy. And that's a very big deal because essentially they're just ignoring how strong and substantial Fire King Island can be if it's actually removed from the board via destruction. And that's where Veidos comes in. Veidos can just pop Fire King Island and nuke your opponent's board while they're trying to set up their entire line of plays. That's already one big advantage that you have. And the Snake Eye Fire King deck is the most popular deck right now. It's like one of the strongest decks in the format, if not the strongest deck in the format. The only argument would be pure Snake Eye, but that's a whole different topic. So just having a hand trap that can just punish your opponent from doing their like best play with the best deck is already really good for Ashened. Like that already gives them a very big level of advantage. The other thing that we need to talk about is like in Legacy of Destruction, we are getting new field spells. We're getting Will. We're getting the Tempai Dragon one. We're getting Nightmare Throne. And these are all really good field spells. Like, these are not bad at all. So, just having a monster that just serves as a board nuke, well, as a nuke for those cards, is just a really good incentive for you to play Veidos in your strategy if you can fit Veidos or just play Ashen itself. We already know that in the future, Gimmick Puppet are going to receive this card, and Mansion of the Underworld is pretty much like the strongest card for Gimmick Puppet. I think like this is one of the cards that will definitely push it to top tier contention if the deck actually sees play. So just having a natural oppressor that can handle this card is also really strong. So now that we talked about the field spells that could be played in the future, uh, and we talked about a few of the field spells that are being played right now, what other things can you do with Veidos that can actually benefit you? Well, we already know about Obsidian and the interaction with the multiple Obsidians on the action monsters, so I'll talk about this for last. But we have other field spells in the game that just have really good self-destruction effects. And if you wish to put Veidos as part of your theme or just as a card that just serves in your deck, you can just use Veidos as an extender with all these other cards. And that might give you an edge on whatever deck you decide to build or play in the future. Uh, we already know the Sky Strikers are getting more support moving forward. We also know Gear, Asian Gear are also getting support, like very soon as well. So these are already two archetypes that just are incentivized to work well with Veidos. And in the right pilot, in the right hands, these are like two strategies that might kick off here in the TCG. So if you ever decide to play these themes, just playing Veidos in your main deck is not a bad idea at all, because it actually naturally synergizes with these two archetypes. Cosmo is like one that's a little bit faded away, but I figured I'd mention it because Cosmo is one of those archetypes where they're slowly getting support indirectly. Veidos is one example. Another example would be Psychic Processor and Psychic Arsenal. Those are two cards that also benefit Cosmo. And it only takes one or two cards to actually make this deck a really strong contender again. Like, back on 2016, Cosmo was a really, really respectable deck. And people don't know this, but Cosmo is one of the reasons Necros like got power crept even as a tier 0 strategy, even before the Forbidden Limited list that actually like nuked Shurit and like limited most of the Necros cards. So now that I talked about these field spells, let's talk about Ashened themselves. So, as we already know, these are the cards in the theme. Like this is pretty much their strategy. They have a very substantial game plan. The game plan is kind of predictable. You kind of just want to summon Veidos on your opponent's board, summon these, and then nuke the Veidos, and then nuke your opponent's entire board, and then reiterate your strategy for the next turn. And one of the cards that make that possible is Ashen for Eternity. Ashen for Eternity can be set with Veidos, or it can be added with Priestess. So, something really cool about Ashen for Eternity, as we already know, Ashen of Eternity can recur cards back from your graveyard. It's also a card that synergizes with Veidos naturally. But one really cool thing about Ashen for Eternity is if you read this effect, the effect to like take control of a monster, this effect also manipulates attack. And that's a very big deal because that means this effect can be done during the damage step. So whenever you have cards or effects that either manipulate attack or they work with monsters being destroyed, like by battle, those cards can be done on sub-steps during the damage step. And that is a very cool ruling for you to know if you decide to play this theme. Because in the future, I think a lot of people are not going to respect this effect. They're not going to respect this card. And they might be caught off guard whenever you try to sequence this card, whenever they're trying to do some of their plays. Let's say, for example, your opponent controls the Veidos and they control like two more monsters. Let's say they control these. You have this one in attack, and they try to swing into the battle phase. Let's say they try to attack with Veidos themselves towards the King Ashened. During damage step, you can flip the Ashen for Eternity. You take the Veidos, and they have a replay. Well, they no longer have a replay with the Veidos. Or something you can do that's really cool is, let's say they are attacking with the hero to the king. The hero has more attack. You flip this, you take the Veidos, and since we're already in the damage step, your opponent cannot take back that attack. The hero becomes 0 attack because of Veidos, this lowering it, and then they lose the hero. So your opponent lost a monster during the damage step, and they lost the Veidos. So that's already two monsters off their board, and you did that during the damage step, which is a phase where your opponent is going to be having issues trying to interact with this interaction. The only way they can do that is if they have a monster effect that negates the activation of Ashened of Eternity, which not many monsters in the game have, except for those typical omnigate monsters like, for example, Baron the Floor. Uh, Awakening of Veidos is pretty much the best card in the theme. The reason this card is really powerful is because the entire action setup can be done with this card. And the only caveat is that you're locked into pyro monsters. But take note, this is a quick play spell. So you can do this during your opponent's turn and just do all your interactions towards your opponent with just this spell card. The other thing is that the pyro lock is only towards the main deck or extra deck. So if you have monsters to special summon from your hand or from your graveyard, or from your spell and trap zone, because that is a thing now. I think those strategies would not be as hindered by this as other main deck strategies that we have in the game. So that's pretty much it. I kind of want to just make people be aware of this because right now people are just activating Fire King Island and they're not activating Sanctuary. I seen people activate Stand Up Centurion and not have a Centurion monster in their spell and trap zone or a Centurion monster in general. I seen people just activate Divine Temple and they try to use this alongside the Abelstar and they just don't sequence it properly. And like it's super easy to just punish all those players with Veidos. And if that gimmick still is like happening, if that habit of players are sustained when Legacy of Destruction like shows up in the TCG, uh, it's only a matter of time until like the Ashen theme takes advantage, and it might actually even become like a best meta contender. Uh, but until then, this I hope you found this video informative into your like into your understanding. I just wanted to talk about this theme for a while now, and I really think you should really look into this. Like worst case scenario, in the chance that Ashen actually flops as an entire archetype, you just have to keep an eye out for Veidos because if they make Veidos a lot more searchable than what it is at the moment, this is going to like actually do damage in the TCG one way or another. But yeah, until then, keep practicing and keep doing.